Welcome back. I hope you all had a good lunch. A few of you I know weren't able to get something, so apologies on behalf of all of us for that. Microsoft are very kindly providing a free lunch, but I think we'll have to adjust the numbers for tomorrow to make sure everyone's satisfied. Now, for the next session, I'm going to talk about how Teams works with Exchange and Skype, which seems like a weird sort of topic. You know, if you're talking about Teams, we want to go to the cloud. Talking about Exchange Server and Skype for Business seems almost like we're going back into the past. But really, this is one of those key prerequisites where when I talk to customers and they've just tried to use Teams in the organisation, I had one CIO speak to me and he said, Microsoft had shown us it all working, it all looked great, and then when we tried it out, half of it didn't work and we hadn't got all those features that had been shown. And sometimes that might be Microsoft just showing you the latest and the greatest, but often that's because some of these bits that have been done haven't been, some of these bits that are in place, legacy systems that you're on at the moment, haven't been configured so that it all works together well. So, you know, that can be meetings not showing up the way that they were supposed to be, or messages that don't arrive in the right place, where you've still got people talking to each other on Skype for Business, and then a whole new world of people that are talking to each other using Microsoft Teams. And by doing some of this properly, we can avoid things that will cause users to go, this tool lives in its own little world, you know, it doesn't work the way it's supposed to. We can try and make the experience as good as possible. So in this session, I'm going to go through two different things. And we're going at a high level because this isn't a day about how to migrate your mailboxes to the cloud or how to build out an on-premises integration with the Microsoft Cloud for integrating your calling systems and integrating your contact centers with Teams. This is really to try and give you the basics of what you need to really consider before you start using Teams if you've got Exchange on-premises or you've got Skype for Business or Link Server 2013 in place today. So we're going to talk about where Teams fits with Exchange and Skype for Business. And then, after having a look at how it fits into the whole Teams architecture, go through what will hopefully be a useful Exchange Hybrid 101. So the basics on what it is, but from a perspective of Microsoft Teams integration. And also, you know, we talk about all this stuff, it's very nice, but you've been told we need to do Teams now. You know, I want to pilot in the next month, and you look at this and go, this is going to take us 6 months to get to this point, or 3 months to get to this point. There's a lot of work we need to do. And although some of the improvements that have came to Exchange Hybrid make some of this a little bit more easy to achieve, we'll go through something that actually Brian blogged about a few weeks ago. He's such a smart person. And I'll show you some of the techniques that he's been using to make it easy to use Teams in a way that doesn't involve any Exchange Hybrid integration at all. And then we'll have a look at how Skype fits into that picture, because you might be using Skype for Business online at the moment, or you might have an on-premises version. What do we need to do so these can coexist? So we'll look at the big picture, how Teams and Skype can coexist, and also if you're running on-premises, what's the basics that you need to achieve to be able to actually start moving people across and get interoperability working between on-premises Skype users and people who are using Microsoft Teams. And go through a bit of that migration experience. There'll be a couple of demos along the way as well. And of course, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask. I'm more focused on the Exchange bits, so my demos are going to be the Exchange demos. Unfortunately, I've not got a hybrid Skype environment to show you today, but obviously, you know, we can talk more about it a bit later if you like. So where does Exchange fit in with Microsoft Teams? So I'll start with the Teams architecture. So Teams itself is composed of lots of different things. And when we talked about Teams standing on the shoulders of giants, connecting to lots of different parts of Office 365, we're talking about lots of different services that it connects to. And that's not just bringing applications in, like being able to see a SharePoint document library within the Teams client itself. It's got hooks into these services within Teams itself. So the Teams application on the desktop and on the web, they're all effectively a standalone interface that connects in either directly into services, like being able to access OneNote notebooks, being able to use Office Online Server or Office Online to show and edit in real time on documents, connecting directly into OneDrive for Business and SharePoint, but also through some core team services. And those services connect in to services like Microsoft Exchange. They connect into the underlying Skype for Business next generation engine that's powering our calling and our meetings and our chat. And it plugs in behind the scenes to services like Microsoft Stream. So when we record meetings, it's doing the heavy lifting of recording that meeting and publishing that to the Stream services. And under the hood, really at the back end, we've got some of these engines that are dealing with data loss prevention. If we're doing DLP inside Microsoft Teams, then it's using Exchange behind the scenes as the service that it pushes those messages through to see whether they trigger certain policies. If we want compliance to happen, if we want to store or retain messages, perhaps we need to put a hold on every chat that happens within the business for maybe 5 years or something like that, then it goes into Microsoft Exchange as the back-end place where that gets stored. So all of that chat history, it journals it off and sends a copy. But all of this happens behind the scenes, not within the client itself. And for Exchange itself, we've got our interface into the service here, where we've got the web client, desktop apps, mobile apps, all accessing Microsoft Teams. And once they get into Microsoft Teams itself, that back-end access to things like calendars happens through Teams. Teams is the thing that connects directly into our calendar, wherever it might be, Microsoft Exchange, and things like connectors, where we get messages pushed. If we've got a Jira connection that's pushing changes to one of our channels, that goes through Exchange server itself, pushes that through Exchange, and then back into back into our Teams channels. And for information protection, where we've got that DLP engine, again, Exchange sitting there as the back end. So it's core really to Teams actually functioning. Without Microsoft Exchange, in some form or other, and even if we're running Exchange on premises, we're still able to use Teams. Without Exchange at all, Teams doesn't really function and work. And this slide from Microsoft shows what the differences are if we're still running our mailboxes on premises. So I've simplified this a little bit because you've got different versions of Exchange Online. Microsoft run Exchange Online as a multi-tenant service, the worldwide service that we all access. There are stricter versions for a version of it in Germany, government versions in the US, dedicated versions that some large clients use as well, and they also have similar levels of what does and doesn't work. Now, because it's a service that was designed as a cloud-first service, everything works if you've got all of your email inside Office 365. We get a tick for everything. Whether we're running an E1 license or above, we can use it. As long as the person's got a mailbox, of course. If we're on premises, then we've got a few greens, like here, the core of Teams, the team and channel management, the team chats themselves. They'll work wherever the mailbox is without any issues. But really, we've got a lot of orange and red areas that we need to be concerned about. So if we want things like e-discovery to work, legal hold and retention to work, they will. And if we want e-discovery cross-premises to work, they will. But we need to make sure that we're actually meeting the minimum requirements. Now, for some of these, like compliance, if the mailbox is on premises, then what Microsoft will do in the background is provision a hidden shadow mailbox inside Office 365 that's used to store that compliance data rather than it being in your Exchange 2010 mailbox or wherever. But if we want some of the more interactive functionality to work, particularly calendaring and modifying things like the user profile picture, then we need to make sure that if the mailbox will stay on premises, we're running a modern version of Exchange. And by modern, that isn't just in support, that is Exchange 2016 or Exchange 2019 with hybrid enabled. And the reason for that is because Teams itself, it's written to be a modern service, and the bits within Microsoft Teams where it looks at where a user's mailbox, don't use the traditional way that older Outlook clients, your ActiveSync client on your mobile phone use. They use a new service called Autodiscover version 2. Autodiscover version 1, it's quite a slow protocol. It first of all looks up the root domain of the company, then attempts to connect to it. It attempts to authenticate, usually using a username and password. Once it's finally found the right place, after looking at the company's on-premises domain, then skipping to Office 365, getting redirected to the right tenant to then connect and retrieve the mailbox settings. then it would show the mailbox or tell the client where the mailbox is. The newer version of AutoDiscover, version 2, uses a simpler protocol so it can quickly get to the mailbox. Now that simpler protocol only exists in Exchange 2016, CU3 or above, and Exchange 2019, and of course Exchange Online. So Teams itself, even if we've got all the hybrid stuff set up in the background, Teams itself isn't able to connect to on-premises Exchange, which means that we don't get all of the functionality. So we need to make sure that we've got all these things in place if we want e-discovery to work, if we want Teams channel management, if we want calendar access to work. On the right-hand side, though, we will never be able to get everything up and running. So if we want to be able to access on-premises contacts, then we'll need to move the mailbox online. If you're using things like the Azure voicemail, cloud voicemail services, again, the mailbox needs to be in the cloud. And functionality that many people might find very essential, being able to add and configure tabs to your chats, being able to add and configure connectors, you need to move the mailbox into the cloud. So before I get into a bit of a demo, I'm just going to go through a quick Hybrid 101. So why would you want to put Exchange Hybrid in? Well, if we're looking at this apart from Microsoft Teams, then it is the way that when you start off with Office 365, usually the first workload you move will be email. That's the service that you can move behind the scenes without needing to consider too much about user adoption. We don't need to walk around all of our offices or train people up on how to continue to send email. If we're going to extend to Office 365 and move mailboxes, then we'll expect that experience will be pretty much the same that they always used to have. If we're planning a Teams project a bit further down the line after moving email, then getting this part right is a good foundation because people won't see big changes. No one's ever went, you know what, we've got modern attachments, that's changed the entire way that we work in the business. They'll probably, after moving their mailbox, still send as many emails, if not more, especially if they've got a big 100 gig mailbox. But if we get it right, then it should be a simple transition. And it gives us those building blocks that we can build upon. And hybrid is the best way to migrate because when we migrate a mailbox through the hybrid experience, then they don't lose their offline cache, the mailbox can move, and the user effectively starts up the next morning after we've moved the mailbox, and they'll be straight in. All of the mail that they've cached on the laptop, if they're out on the road, will still be there. They might have to download a new copy of the offline address book, but apart from that, things should stay as they were. Their contacts will be there, their nickname cache will still be present. It should to them seem almost like they've been moved between Exchange versions or someone's had to move their mailbox from server to server overnight. If anything, on an older client, they might see a prompt saying an admin has made a change and you need to restart Outlook. That's about it. So it's the best migration experience and it gives coexistence. So it's not full coexistence, but it gives some key areas. So the core of that is things like shared mailboxes, where if people have got shared mailboxes on premises, people can access them after they've moved to the cloud. We can see people's calendars. We've got a full organizational-wide global address list. Some areas can be configured but aren't supported, like read-write access to calendars. So we still want to move people like PAs and the executives together so that they can still work together in a normal sort of way. So there's still some planning around it, but all of the tools and all of the procedures to do this are really sort of well known. So if you're using a service like Microsoft's Fast Track service, then they've already written tools that you can use and consume to help discover the sharing within your organization. And as long as you're running Exchange 2010 and above, and some organizations are still on Exchange 2010, you've got until January before it goes out of support, then you can implement hybrid. It was designed with that there. So if you are moving to the cloud, what we don't usually recommend is putting in a newer version of Exchange if you've already got something that's hybrid capable. And if you are running an older version of Exchange, putting in Exchange 2016 to act as the hybrid server isn't going to do all the magic you want for Teams either. We'll need to move everyone to that newer version, so you might as well just move them all to the cloud if you can. If you do need to keep people on premises, though, for a longer period of time, then you do need to be running a newer version of Exchange. And usually when we're doing this, we're looking at two key parts for this. So there's modern authentication, which Brian talked about, conditional access, multi-factor authentication. For running a new version of Exchange, 2016, 2019, we can enable all that good stuff, have people sign in to Azure AD using those credentials, use those conditional access policies to access their mailbox on premises as part of a single sign-on process. And via the OAuth connector, which we'll show you in a little bit, we've got the connection back to on-premises for Teams, and that's how it's able to access that calendar. So do you need it, though, for Microsoft Teams? Well, obviously, if all your mailbox is already in Office 365, then no, you don't need hybrid today. If you've moved everyone to the cloud and you didn't have hybrid in place, I'm not suggesting go and put it in. You're not going to get anything from it in particular. But if you're planning on migrating to Exchange Online, then hybrid is going to be the best way to get there quickly. Rather than buying a third-party tool to migrate for you, if you've got a simple Exchange organization, you've got a single AD, you've got Exchange servers within a single AD forest, then hybrid is always going to be the easiest way to move your mailboxes to Office 365 and then start really rolling out Teams. But if you are running Exchange 2016 or 2019 and you've been challenged to get Teams up and running and working as best as you can, but migrating the email isn't something you can do immediately, or maybe you've got to go half and half and keep people on premises, then it's going to be useful. So enabling full hybrid is going to give you that Teams coexistence, and you'll get that calendar functionality. So the key parts of a hybrid deployment are the Federation Trust, and the Federation Trust is the part that gives us that FreeBusy cross-premises. So if we've moved a mailbox to the cloud and we need to be able to check from our migrated mailbox whether someone's going to be available for a meeting, then Federation Trust gives us that FreeBusy access, where behind the scenes it can connect out from Exchange Online and check whether somebody's available on-prem. It also acts as the engine for read-only calendar sharing as well. And we've got that native mailbox move, where I said it gives us that offline cache that's retained during the migration itself. With the native mailbox move as well, we get an easy trick that everyone should obviously take advantage of, which is that we can move the mailbox in online mode, which means if you've got 100 people and they've all got to be migrated on a Monday morning, and some people have got a 100 gig mailbox and some people have got a 1 gig mailbox, we can pre-synchronize their mailboxes to Office 365 first, and then at the time we want to cut over. Now, admittedly, sometimes this can take a number of hours. It could take 4 or 5 hours to cut over that 100 people, because Exchange Online is going to put those into a schedule to do, but we can cut them over at effectively the same period. We don't need to wait to synchronize or plan to synchronize 100 gig mailboxes over a single evening, for example. We've got secure mail flow, which means that when we've moved people to the cloud and we're in that mixed mode of operation, then if people have got internal out-of-office replies, then it will still know that they're within our organization. Part of extending to the cloud is that it has a secure channel for SMTP, for email, back and forward to Office 365. With that secure mail flow in place, we know that it's encrypted. We know that that mail originated from our own Exchange organization. Exchange knows what our SSL certificates are on-prem, so it can say, yes, that is contoso.com. They're allowed to send mail, and will allow all of the Exchange headers, voting messages. We know it's internal. All of that can flow both ways. And hybrid model authentication, that is that part. That enables us to enable conditional access. It enables us to use tools like the new Outlook app and have the proper sign-in experience. And the OAuth connection. So making sure that we've got calendar access, but it has some other functionality behind the scenes as well. It's got functionality for managing message records management, so the retention policies for messages, and it allows cross-premises discovery as well. So if you've got a mix of mailboxes between on-prem and online, and you need to discover both to find that message that the legal team are looking for, then you've got a single integrated experience. So I really like hybrid. Really like hybrid, so I've got a whole bunch of slides telling you how great it is. But a single seamless organization. The thing that I always liked about hybrid, the whole experience of it, was that when we were moving to the cloud, we were effectively building an extension out the back of on-premises. It wasn't like a separate hosted service. And when you start that hybrid deployment, when you enable hybrid for your organization, look at it that way. It's not two separate Exchange organizations. It is one. We've extended our Active Directory to to the cloud. We have a single set of accounts across on-premises and online. They're kept in sync. When we enable hybrid, then we're looking to do exactly the same thing. We're looking to have a single cross-premises mixed hybrid Exchange organisation. So there's two options that you've got, and one of them will be applicable if you're trying to get to it online quickly, and one of them is suitable for that longer-term Teams coexistence. So there's two core options when you deploy Exchange Hybrid, and often the recommended one when you run the wizard will be to use minimal hybrid. Minimal hybrid is really giving us that core component to enable us to move mailboxes seamlessly, but it's not giving us everything else. So if we're using minimal hybrid, then we can do things like mail routing, but it's not using that secure mail flow channel. It's using the normal email flow channels that you've already got in place. So if you can email people outside the organisation and you can email people on Office 365 today, then it will use that same route that's available to send messages back and forward between on-premises and online. Because we're using Azure AD Connect as the glue to provide our unified global address list to synchronize all our accounts to the cloud, then even if we run a minimal hybrid, then all of that stuff's in place. You'll have a unified global address list before you even run the hybrid configuration wizard. The full hybrid gives us these extra features, though. It gives us that free busy sharing, out-of-office understanding that messages are internal to the organisation because we've got that secure SMTP channel, and things like mail tips. If you go to send an email to someone and they are out of the office, before getting that reply back, it can discover that they are out of the office, save you sending that message. That's some of the core functionality that works across premises. And once you sign in to OWA as a user after you've been migrated, it gives us that redirection. So when you sign in, it says, your mailbox has been moved to the cloud. Click here to continue. It gives you that extra part. With the minimal hybrid and full hybrid, we can use the same set of tooling. So if we're using the EMC on 2010 and we want to move mailboxes that way, we can do that whether we're in full or minimal hybrid. So we can use our existing tools that we already use day to day to migrate mailboxes to the cloud. And if we need to move back from hybrid, if we've moved someone to the cloud and for some reason things have all went wrong, then we can move the mailbox back to on-premises, solve that issue, and then attempt to move them again. And the core part, we get that OSC redirection, whatever happens. But the simple hybrid isn't going to give us the features that I'm going to show you in just a minute with Teams. Now, one of the most challenging parts of implementing Exchange Hybrid has always been setting everything up so you're ready to move to the cloud, because the key parts you usually need if you want to be able to move a mailbox or you want calendar coexistence to work is to have Exchange published to the outside world with valid SSL certificates. So that usually means if you're currently running Exchange behind the firewall and you're using internally issued SSL certificates, or you haven't potentially got everything configured the way you need it to for Office 365, then you'd need to start your project by ordering new SSL certificates, changing your external namespace so you've got something that's valid to the outside world. So if you were using mail.contoso.local today for OWA, you might need to rename that to mail.contoso.com, order a valid SSL certificate, set up auto-discover, then configure firewall rules to allow it to be published. Some organizations might need to put in place new load balancers or reverse proxies to enable connections from Exchange Online to go inside into your organization and reach your Exchange servers. And that can take some time. So what Microsoft realized was, well, this is the bit that stops people moving. And obviously what they would like people to do is easily move to the cloud. The quicker people onboard into Exchange Online and move mailboxes, the quicker they can start using additional services like Teams. And this is what the hybrid agent is about. So if you've used some of the Azure services that come part of Azure AD Premium, you might have seen Azure App Proxy. And that's the foundation for this. And what it allows us to do is install an application on premises that signs into our tenant. And it reaches out and says, whenever there's a connection from a service in Azure, or whenever there's a connection from Exchange Online in this case, then I'll proxy that connection and take it in. So it enables us to publish a long URL to the outside world without actually configure any firewall rules. What we need is the agent itself, the hybrid agent, to be able to reach out to Office 365 and make an outbound connection. It'll sit there and wait for Exchange Online to make an inbound connection. It'll hit the hybrid agent's URL, which is a big long string, and ms@proxy.net, and then it'll bring that connection back to on-prem. It avoids us needing to publish anything to the outside world for things like OAuth, for the calendar sharing, FreeBusy, and mailbox moves. And it enables us to avoid having to buy new SSL certificates, effectively simplifying the hybrid deployment itself. We put the hybrid agent in place. It's the recommended way going forward. We can put multiple ones on if we need high availability, and we're able to make sure that we have avoided what's usually quite a complex step for enabling hybrid. This core part should enable things like the OAuth relationship to work, which mean that we can see our team's calendar. So I'm going to go and give you a quick demo of what this looks like. So I'm going into my own tenant here, and this is my hybrid tenant at the moment. And let's duplicate that. There we go. And this is Exchange 2016. And we're looking at the Exchange Admin Center. And this is where an Exchange administrator usually manages their on-premises mailboxes. And at some point, they'll have went into this, and they'll have gone to the hybrid button. And on the hybrid server itself, they'll have ran the hybrid configuration wizard. And the hybrid configuration wizard is the core that's set up our organization for hybrid. So this is already in place, and it's already working. So I'm not going to break it because the next part of my demo won't be very impressive then. But the core of it is pretty simple. There's usually a lot of planning that goes around this, but the hybrid configuration wizard is a desired state configuration engine. We're defining within this wizard what we want our hybrid to look like, where we want it to connect to and from. And once this is configured and in place, or once we've defined what the configuration looks like, it goes away and makes all the configuration changes so that hybrid works. And it's very simple to use. So I've got my hybrid configuration wizard here. It's picked a server. I also pick where it's going to connect to, what type of Office 365 it's going to connect to. As I talked about earlier, we've got a variety of different places that Office 365 is hosted. And we'll go through this wizard and we can sign in and set all of the settings that will define the type of relationship. For example, that minimal or full hybrid, which servers we're going to use for mail to go in and out of our organization, and we'll decide whether or not we'll use that hybrid agent as the way to get into our organization. Once that's in place, we can start to move people to Office 365. So here I've moved a few different people. I look in my user interface. I have a single view of people who have the mailboxes on-prem. Those are listed as users. So my on-premises account, which I'll show you in a minute, there's on-premises mailbox, Office 365 account. They've been moved to Office 365. So we see that single view of the world. And when I go and migrate people, then I won't do that from here on premises. I'll do that from the Exchange management tools in the cloud. Now, once I've configured hybrid in place, one of the things that we'll do as part of that setup process is configure this relationship for teams to use. And this will be the OAuth configuration where we're setting up a service account or an application account for it to be able to connect from Exchange Online to on-premises. Once that's in place, we don't need to have a username or password type relationship for teams to actually work. So here I've got an on-premises mailbox. That is that on-premises mailbox we saw there. And this is simply outlook.exchangelabs.co.uk. This is a server in my garage at home. So it's not in Office 365 at all. And here we've got my example appointment later on today at the Reactor in London. Now, if I go into Office 365, then I've got Microsoft Teams. And this is the account that relates to it. This is the synchronized account put into Office 365 by Azure AD Connect. And I've not moved the mailbox yet, but I've got hybrid in place. So I've got on-premises account here. I've been able to set my picture because I've got hybrid set up, and I'm able to access my Teams as normal. Now, because I've got hybrid in place, and this is the bit that won't work if we don't have this configured, I'm able to go to my Meetings tab, And it doesn't look impressive, and it's not even meant to. It's meant to just work. So if I click on this appointment, behind the scenes, when I showed you the architecture slide earlier, what's happening is that those team services in Office 365 are making that connection out to my server in my garage at home. It's not happening from the client here. It's not attempting to access that here at all. So it gives me the kind of experience that your users will just expect to happen, where I can go in and I can schedule a meeting. Let's pick from 3 o'clock. So actually, let's pick 3 till 4. And if I put in test meeting, this will hopefully, fingers crossed, be entirely mundane and just the normal experience. If you're using Teams today and you moved everyone to the cloud, you're not expecting this to be any different to what you'll do today. I press schedule. In the background, whirs away and schedules the meeting. If I go and look in my calendar on premises, it's made that connection behind the scenes and created the meeting itself. And that should not impress you. It's just working. And how long did it take to set up? Yeah, you don't need to, really don't need to. It took about, 20 minutes to set up that OAuth relationship. But we needed to have Exchange 2016 in place. So if you're running Exchange 2010 today and you just want that to work, then either move the mailboxes to the cloud or do all the other prereqs, install Exchange 2016, move all your mailboxes to it, maybe upgrade to 2019 as well. And at the end of your 6-month or longer project, you'll be able to click meetings. It shouldn't look impressive, but it's what people will expect to happen. Because if I break hybrid, or if I hadn't got hybrid in place, and I did think of a few different ways to do this, but there's not a simpler one. I'm just going to stop the web services, going to stop OWA, going to stop publishing Exchange to the outside world to simulate what it would be like if we didn't have this configured or available. And this might be the experience, or similar to the experience you'll have if you're running Exchange at the moment and you've just spun up a Teams trial and someone's done the identity sync for you and put that in place. But then you've used Teams, and it's not working. And you, like that CIO that said to me, we tried Teams, it didn't look anything like the version Microsoft showed us. All of it was broken and missing. So if I go back to this now, I'm not going to click on the Meetings tab yet. I'm just going to refresh the page. And you'll see it's not unintelligent. It's been able to detect that we haven't got access to meetings. It can't make that connection out from the back end. So we just lose the Meetings tab altogether. And if we want that to work, then we'll have to put in OAuth, or we'll have to do something else. And this is what Brian blogged about on your C7 Solutions blog, actually, the other week.
Meetings didn't disappear for me. Is that new?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you used to get an error.
Yes, that's what my customer got. That's
yes. Yeah. So now it varies. Like 2013 on premises, an error. This thought it could do it. So yes, you should get an error. When I tried it here, I didn't get the error I was expecting. So it's either changed, which it can do, or but as of 2 weeks ago, I also got an error with a customer who was looking to do the same thing, and said, I didn't come up with a solution, and I pointed them at your blog while they were setting up those tests. I don't take credit for what others have looked at. And what Brian did was Brian looked at a way to try and hide this programmatically. So we can use Teams app setup policies. This is fairly new. It's not in all of my tenants yet. In one it is, and one it isn't. So I'm going to show you the one where it does exist. And we create a policy that hides the calendar. Very simple. And then we assign that to individual users. And you'll see this is quite easy to do. We'll do this in the Teams Admin Center. So in the Teams Admin Center here, we've got a Teams app page. I press refresh to make sure it doesn't bomb out halfway through the demo. I press the Teams app page, and we've got Teams app setup policies. So in here, we can create different types of policies to assign to different types of users. And the intention of this is so we can curate a set of applications that a user will have. Because the default is fairly straightforward. We've got let's have a look at our global org-wide policy. We've got the activity tab, the chat tab, Teams itself. We've got calendar, calling, files. That's the default that we've got on the left-hand side. We might want to have a policy that changes what that looks like. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new policy, and we'll call it on premises. And to make sure that we don't see any errors and we have an experience where it always hides that calendar, then we pick this from the list and then we simply remove it. Save that new policy. We can add extra apps if we like, but if we're just trying to make sure that that meetings tab isn't going to cause users any discomfort, then we'll create that policy. And we need to say, we'll present Teams as that being the experience that they'll get today. And for that to work properly, then they'll also need to go in, and it's always dangerous, isn't it, to consider opening Outlook in the middle of a presentation or in the middle of a day. I usually try and leave it as closed as often as possible. Thankfully, I didn't need to open the whole thing. I wouldn't have got many emails, but you never know. What we need them to do is use the Teams meeting experience. Now, recently Microsoft have released or updated the add-in for Outlook to support Outlook 2010, which if you're in this sort of situation where you've been told, we've got to do Teams, but you haven't had a chance to update Office on all of your machines yet, yep, I'm here. You know, the one thing they could fix in Outlook is reminders for events that are in the past, right? That's the most annoying thing. Anyway, with this add-in, in Outlook 2010, 2013, 2016, 2019, and Office Pro Plus, we can use this as the place where we schedule the meeting from. You know, this is the experience that we'll have to present to users as how it will work going forward. If there's no connection back, there's no hybrid relationship, then if they're going to use Teams and have the Teams meeting experience, schedule meetings with other people, they'll need to do it, unfortunately, unless you've got all these bits in place, through Outlook itself. So, Exchange with Teams in a nutshell. So, number one, if you can, move mailboxes to Exchange Online. If you're running Exchange 2013 or earlier, that's the only way, if you're running an older version of Exchange, that you're going to get the full experience. If you're going to move people to the cloud, the best migration experience available will be by using Exchange Hybrid. And as you've seen, we can connect Teams back to on-premises if we're running a newer version of Exchange like 2016 or 2019. You'll need hybrid in place for that good Teams experience. But if you can't, use those Teams app setup policies as the key to try and make sure that you never see errors on user machines, and use the Outlook add-ins instead as the way to schedule meetings. So we're going to change gear completely now and talk about Skype and Teams and how we manage and move that transition across. So there's two different starting points for migration. Apologies for my icons. I've used them out of this new recommended design. And it seems all right in some cases, but I thought that was a particularly rubbish picture that PowerPoint offered me up as a picture of a building. It really looks like something out of a Wreck-It Ralph or something. But it'll do. On-premises Skype for Business Server or Skype for Business Online. It's got a little picture of a cloud. And these two starting points are going to both require the use of Teams modes, or the coexistence modes, which we'll talk about next. But at a high level, our processes are going to be similar wherever we're starting from. So if we're running Skype for Business Server on premises, then we're going to need to enable Skype for Business Hybrid first. You'll often hear about people running Link or Skype on premises and say, well, we'll just do a fresh cut over entirely. Now, Jason has worked on quite a few of these migrations where people have moved across and had the experience of both ways. So Jason will attest that it is far, far more painful if you leave out those steps and just go, we're going to launch from scratch over on Microsoft Teams and forget about our old Skype for Business deployment. The best experience is going to be if you enable Skype for Business hybrid, first of all, and then migrate people to Skype for Business Online. And then for both of these, we're going to deploy that Teams client alongside Skype for Business, alongside Office. As of a week ago, this is starting. If you're just consuming Office Pro Plus from the cloud, it's starting to roll Teams into that for existing deployments. And for about 6 months, if you've installed Office Pro Plus as part of Office 365, it's installed the Teams client behind the scenes. So it might be, if you do nothing and have done very little setup for your Office deployment with Office 365, that Teams will automatically deploy in the background and be ready for you to use. But then we also need to do some configuration on the service side as well. Or Microsoft, if you work for very small organisation, Microsoft might decide to just do it for you. So you probably do want to get ahead of this. So Teams coexistence uses different modes, and you'll see these referred to as Teams modes in the documentation. And here we've got the different types of modes and the experiences that are available. So when we're in Teams only mode, we're expecting everything to be, if you can't see all of that, don't worry, I've got a bit more explanation on the slides on the next page, so you will be able to read it. When we're in Teams only mode, we're in the final state that we should be in. So if you're running Teams today and everybody's on Teams, then everyone should be in Teams only mode. You don't want to be in the bottom mode, which is Islands mode at all. But as we transition people across, Teams only mode will be the place that we're aiming to get to, where calls and chats live in Teams, we schedule meetings in Teams, and we've got access to team channels as well. Now, if we're using Skype for Business with collaboration and meetings, or we're looking to use scenarios like meetings first, then the calls and chats will still live inside Skype for Business, but we'll use Teams for meetings, and we'll use it for our collaboration stuff. We'll use it when we're talking in our Teams channels, the core of Teams itself. If we're looking to use the collaboration-only mode, Teams channels, and we want to use it as a group chat tool, but not for meetings, not for our chats, then we'll use Skype for Business with the Teams collab mode. If we're not ready to launch Teams yet in the organisation for some users, perhaps they're running on VDI and everything is working well, and it's going to be some time before we can launch that for them, then we can put them into Skype for Business only mode, which effectively depermissions them from using Microsoft Teams. The default position that a lot of organisations start in is Islands mode, and that's not the best place to be. And Islands mode, it is good if you want people to just try the tools, but it isn't particularly good in terms of user experience. You really need to set expectations correctly. And there's lots of problems that are associated with that, with people launching it, never launching it again, and messages landing in different places. But when you're in Islands mode, it is exactly that. There's the island where you're inside Microsoft Teams, where you chat to people who use Microsoft Teams. And then there's that other world, maybe the continent, where everyone on Skype for Business, they all talk on Skype for Business. And it could be that if you're running both clients side by side on your desktop, then you'll be getting messages from all sorts of different people, where the people using the Skype client, it arrives in Skype, and the people using the Teams client, it arrives inside Microsoft Teams. And if you're trying to avoid that confusion, when we talked earlier about trying to make sure that we just present like a smaller set of tools to people rather than more, then Islands mode isn't going to give you that. It's going to give that experience where if we don't set the expectations correctly for using this mode, then they're just going to see yet another tool you've launched to the business. When do I use Skype? When do I use Microsoft Teams? Why are my messages arriving in both? Now, if we give it a little bit of thought and go into one of these other modes, then collaboration and meetings mode fits well if you want people to continue to use Skype for Business. And you do also want to launch Teams. And if it is things like call recording, or you've got contact center users, and you can't move voice services to the cloud yet from on-premises, but you do want to deploy Teams meeting room devices, you do want people to record their meetings in stream, you want transcription of meetings, you want all of the good new stuff, and you're willing to invest in newer meeting room technologies, then collaboration and meetings mode might be for you. And that's the one where Microsoft launched it, or announced at Ignite, meetings first, where they'll bring back that ability to schedule Teams meetings from the Skype on-premises client as well. Collaboration only mode fits well, perhaps if you are using things like VDI environments, or you don't want to move people from Skype meetings today. If you've heavily invested in devices from vendors that don't support Teams or don't have devices for Teams that support video calling with Teams and can't be upgraded, and there's a longer tail until you've upgraded, then it might be that you're going to use Teams for that collaboration workload. So that's where we're going to be able to do some of the things I showed you earlier, like building our applications inside Microsoft Teams, using Flow for approvals and so on, where we want to get some of the benefits of Teams today. We want people to collaborate better, fit into that inner circle of communications, but we can't move them from the thick client. But Teams only mode is where we want to get to, and that is going to be where everybody uses the client. And when we're in that mode, we're not looking at the whole organisation. We're looking at the people who have been switched into that. And once they've been switched, then that's the point that the client knows for things like Iron and Chat, that if they're talking to someone who's still on Skype for Business, who's in Skype only mode, then there's two-way communication. Now, that coexistence does have its limitations, and it means that if somebody's using Teams and they're used to seeing Giphies, they're using all the full emoticons, emojis within the client, and they're having that full great experience, then some of that isn't going to traverse from Teams over to Skype because it doesn't support those capabilities. They're not updating Skype to work in the way that Teams does. So it's effectively going through some middleware in the middle that's dealing with the federation between both Teams users and Skype users. And areas like screen sharing. So if today people are screen sharing using Skype, if somebody's moved over to Teams only mode, although that has screen sharing between other people on Teams, then that doesn't work across the divide, nor do group chats. In those cases, it escalates that to a Skype multi-person meeting. It turns it into a Skype meeting as they're chatting. If we initiate a group chat, or someone on the Skype side adds another participant into it, or wants to do screen sharing. It's at those points during that coexistence where the experience is a little bit different, and we need to communicate what that's going to be like. It might drive you to try and move as quickly as you can over into Teams only mode. And escalating calls, all of those scenarios where we go from a one-to-one chat, and Skype, one of the best things it did was escalating from a one-to-one chat to a multi-person chat to a full meeting. Those don't work natively within the Teams client. Again, they'll be brought into that Skype for Business experience. So there is a high-level journey that you'll probably go on. And that is, first of all, if you're looking to move, you'll go and use Skype for Business for IM and calling, but then start using meetings and collaboration. But over time, the plan should be to have some strategy to move over into Teams only mode. Now, if you don't, then at some point, if you're not using anything complex that can't be dealt with yourself, at some point Microsoft are going to come along and they'll give you a date and they'll say, at the end of the month, we're going to upgrade you into Teams only mode, and you won't be able to go back. And if you get that notification, you've not got a good reason to tell them to stop doing it, or you miss it, then you might suddenly find that your organisation is upgraded at the end of the month or a set date to Teams only mode, and people are unprepared for it and things stop working. If you sign up for a new Office 365 subscription today, you'll start off in Teams only mode as well. So you've got to be aware of these modes, and you've got to plan for that change. And there's the simplest journey for moving, which is looking at the different groups of people. And we'll say there's, 4 different groups of users, cohorts of users, where we're going to help them prepare in all the different ways that they need to, help them understand the different scenarios. And if we can, then we might start with collaboration mode, get them ready for that experience so they can start to get some of the benefits, but then very quickly move them into Teams only mode. Once everybody's been moved over, that's the point that we can get to our end state, which is people no longer use the Skype for Business client at all. There's likely to be quite a long tail, though, of the Skype for Business client. Where I work, we are in Teams only mode, and I've been in Teams only mode for a number of months now, and I don't launch Skype for Business at the beginning of the day. But people still send me Skype for Business meeting invites from outside the organisation. So I'll look at 1 minute to the hour, and I'll be just about to join the meeting. I'll go, oh no, it's a Skype meeting. Click it, and I'll sit there when it whirs away, signing in the background. I still need the Skype client to be able to join those meetings, but I don't need it switched on a day-to-day basis. But because we don't have to move everybody at once, we can have different upgrade journeys for different people. And this can be down to the individual, but it's likely to be groups or cohorts of users that we're looking to migrate. And some of these people, we might let them have a play around with it in islands mode, where we're not planning on moving them across entirely, but and they might still need to use Skype for Business for day-to-day chats with other people in the business, but we don't want to move them into that mixed mode, like collaboration or meetings mode, and they might not be ready for Teams only mode either. So we might put some people, it might be IT or a group that are friendly to the business, that you can properly prepare for what those limitations are and move them into islands mode. And it might be a different group of users that go into collaboration and meetings mode or a different mode. We can pick and choose what this upgrade journey is going to be like as we move people and we evaluate and we decide what's going to work well for us. And then as we upgrade, we might end up with some of the business on Teams only mode. So that could be people who have laptops and a mobile in the business. That could be 70% of our business can move over to Teams only mode. And we might have a set of users that might be today VDI users, that might be people who work in our contact center that need Skype for Business today. Those users might be the people that live in collaboration and meetings mode at that point. And again, we're aiming for that end state where it's always going to be, however long it takes, Teams only mode, because there's not really going to be, realistically, a long-term end tail for Skype for Business. Maybe there'll be another new version, who knows, but new features aren't going to arrive in it. The best plan to make is one for Microsoft Teams. So to finish off today, I'm going to give you a bit of a run through of what Skype Hybrid is and what you need to enable it. As I say, I'm not the Skype for Business expert. The people that are going to talk to you about call routing, they're going to talk to you about voice policies, call diagnostics tomorrow. They're the Teams people that are focused on that. What I want to do is hopefully tell you about the basics of what you're going to need as a minimum to be able to start to consider moving people to the cloud. So our minimum requirements, first of all, we need Skype for Business online licenses. If you've got Teams licenses, if you've got an Office 365 E3 plan, then it's likely you've got these. So most organizations, anybody on an enterprise plan should have those within their subscription. And if you're using Exchange Hybrid, if you're also planning on using hybrid identity, if you're planning on allowing people to sign into Office 365 using the current AD credentials, then you're likely synchronizing to Office 365 using Azure AD Connect. And we need people to either have password sync in place or Active Directory Federation services or a third-party identity provider. They need to be able to sign in with some sort of common credential into Office 365. And we need it deployed within our Active Directory. I don't believe it's supported if you're using a hosted third-party Skype for Business provider. We have to use that within our own environment. We need to have some of the parts enabled that allow external connectivity. So at a minimum, we need edge servers deployed within the organization, and we need to be running at least Link Server 2013 or Skype for Business 2015 or 2019 on-prem. The mailbox will need to be moved to Exchange Online as part of this process, and we need to make sure we've got the right configuration in place. You don't need ExpressRoute to be able to do this. The recommendation for a few years now, after Microsoft initially recommending ExpressRoute, is not to use it. The recommendation now, if you're looking to connect voice services into Office 365, is to, if you can, use direct routing and use ISPs that have good peering with Microsoft. Only use ExpressRoute if it's absolutely required. And we'll go through the following steps. So we need to make sure that our domains on-prem, our SIP domains, are validated within the Office 365 tenant. We need to set up Azure AD Connect and synchronize our directory to the cloud. People need to be able to sign in. And if we haven't already, then we'll need to deploy edge servers to make sure that the cross-premises traffic, IM and chat that's going between our on-premises Skype for Business users and people who've been migrated can go through the edge servers. We need to make sure that we've got federation enabled. That will make sure that chats will traverse the boundaries between the environments, and we'll need to update our environment so we've got split domain. And that's so that the SIP domain that people use, like contoso.com, can be shared between our on-premises Skype for Business deployment and our online environment, so they're all sharing the same namespace. We need to make sure that we've got networking, firewall configuration in place. It needs to be published correctly to the world. The UI, when we're configuring our Skype for Business servers, need to be able to reach out and make that hybrid configuration. And we'll need to have Skype for Business PowerShell to use for the migration itself. We'll need to move people manually using PowerShell over from on-premises to online as we move them across. By enabling hybrid, they won't suddenly go into the cloud. We'll move people one by one. So when we get to Teams only mode, what does it look like? So Teams only mode, if you're just using Teams today, I'm not going to show you just Teams like we showed you at the beginning of the day, because the basics of that are what you'd normally expect, where we've got our phone system, we can do chat, calling, meetings, everything's enabled when we're in Teams only mode. From the client side in Skype for Business though, this is the client that will either launch and leave running in the background, or it will get automatically launched when we click on links. Now, from a Skype for Business user perspective, it's telling them that things have changed. And it says your organization has now moved to Microsoft Teams. So as soon as you launch Skype for Business, after moving someone into Teams only mode, waiting a number of hours, say 8 hours after switching them over, what they should see when they open up Skype for Business is this is the front user interface. It's a splash screen that will always show when they launch the client. And it's telling them that they can go to Microsoft Teams, and it's also going to inform them that things have moved across. Functionality has been reduced within the Skype for Business client. And when they look inside Skype for Business, if they pressed here, Start Skype for Business, then they'll see the normal UI, but you'll see that we've lost some of our contacts, we've lost the ability to start new meetings or create new meetings, start new chats from the client. And instead, we've got a history tab, and we've got a list of our meetings, and that's giving us access to our existing, ongoing, or scheduled Skype for Business meetings, and the links to our Microsoft Teams meetings. And if we click Go to Teams, or we press Join on the bottom link there for a Microsoft Teams meeting, that'll go straight into the Teams client itself. And this is the key part of it is, what we're not going to do is join a Skype meeting using the Teams client. We can dial into a meeting if it's got an audio conferencing number that we can use. But in general, the meeting client has to match the service that hosts the meeting. So the Skype for Business client will always be used to join Skype for Business meetings and escalated multi-party chats with people on Skype for Business. And we'll always use that Teams client to join the Teams meetings. If we use the Skype for Business client, when it's set up correctly, it's always going to redirect us into the Teams client. And they can always, we're not going to stop them from ever being able to launch the client itself. So they can always launch Skype for Business if they need to, because they still might get those meetings organised from outside the business. You can, if you want, allow them to use the web client for Skype for Business to join it and download the add-in, but the experience isn't really as good. It's better just to leave that Skype for Business client there and available. Should they want to use it, it doesn't need to launch every time they use the client, though, or every time they use the PC. And a Teams user can always join the meetings the meetings that have been scheduled by the people. So if I look in my list of meetings for the day in Microsoft Teams, if it's a Skype for Business meeting, I'll click on the link in there and it'll go across to the side. So Skype to Teams in a nutshell, we've got the coexistence modes. Always use the coexistence modes to group different groups of users together so they get the right experience. Ideally, try and avoid islands mode. Make sure that you consider what mode people should be in, and if they're going to be in Teams only mode, make sure they understand they're going to get access to everything inside Teams. They're no longer going to use Skype for Business. Or if they're using one of those coexistence modes, like collaboration mode only or collaboration and meetings mode, tell them your chats will still be in Skype for Business. You'll still chat and call people from the Skype for Business client. But now we're launching all these great services in Teams and talk to them about the things they'll actually be able to do in Teams rather than all of the things that they won't. So up in about 15 minutes' time is Brian, who's back on, talking about data protection and compliance for Teams. I'm going to go grab a coffee. If you've got any questions, give me a shout. Thank you. Yeah. A persistent chat. Not at all. I did take that off. I originally had it on one of these slides, but I took it off because it's used so rarely. There's no interaction whatsoever, so that is left as a standalone application. So it's almost like that would be an entire replacement.
Okay. Right. Thank you. So, are you making the slides for these 2 days available?
Absolutely. So the slides are going to be there and recordings as well. So what they're recording in us